Good morning, dear friends. Holy Yidden. Today is no ordinary day, the 15th of Adar, Shushan, Purim, and keeping the Purim spirit active and alive, March 4th also. Um, and so may we only have good news for Klal Yisrael, for our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael, and for the world over. And well, I should just say, we're studying the entire Talmud one page, one line at a time, and we are in the tail end of Mesechah Sukkah. We're learning about Sukkah structures, layouts, dimensions. It'll get a lot more interesting than that. Actually, the engineers in our group are very excited, Baruch Hashem, and I'm excited to have an engineer in the group. Um, um, we dedicate our learning for the wonderful members of our Chabur and their households for health and happiness and all manners of good news. We dedicate our learning as well for friends of the Chabura, Rivka Bas Pesha, Liotzi Beren Abana Sipora, then Otzvil B'Tega Tovim, Mordechai Mesimcha, Mesuba Mercedes, Velvaruv Meneta, Moshe McLaren, Tziba Miriam, Kappa Ben Lema, Abram Ben Aviva, Malka Bas Simcha, Chaim Yaakov Ben Chaviva, Luba Bas Machle, Moshe Ben Rivka, Devair, Irina Bas Luba, Leo Ben Rachel HaKoyin, Neri Ben Ori Miriam, Nisa Ben Rachel, Yosef Ben Flora, Gershom Ben Chaya, Mordechai Ben Chaya, Liana Meira Bas Miriam Yanina, Tulula Bas Hilda, Chaya Bas Rachel, Ephraim Ben Sora, Rivka Abbas Alta Chaya, and Vicky Bas Rachel. Um, Actually, we probably with that. Okay. If anyone has any names to remove for good news, please let me know. And Hashem's help taking off one name here. Took another one off the other day and made the list shrink and shrink with news of health and happiness. We're going to share the screen. Again, just to note, we are in the midst of, I'm not sure what they're calling it, Operation Epic Fury, Shagat Aryeh. You know, we have a set of the Shagat Aryeh. I don't know where it is though. The joke is they're calling the operation in Hebrew the Lion's Roar, which is, I believe, Shagat Aryeh. There's also a very famous Torah work called the Shagas Aryeh. So you have all these people sitting with the Sefer saying, "Oh, this is the secret battle plans." And I bet you I bet you whoever sells the Shagas Aryeh may have had a uptick of Muslim purchasers. No, I'm kidding. And we daven for our Chayalim and for the Tayasim of Israel and America and whoever else is involved, and we daven for the safety of the Jews of Israel. As much as this is perhaps an important and necessary obliteration of evil, it is with no little sacrifice by Jews of Israel. If you follow the news and see the beautiful videos coming out of Purim celebrations in the shelters, you can't help but admire the spirit of the Jewish people. But I guess we should also remember that in addition to every video that you see, there are haggard, frazzled, overwhelmed families and parents and kids that are no doubt having all of their traumas from not recent things being triggered, and we should certainly hold them in our tefillos and pray that they should have a safer Israel, but also be able to have relief from this not at all easy moment for them. And shenishma b'sorot tovot. All right. Here we go. So Rebbe Eli, we started a Mishnah talking about the Sukkah, and with little fanfare, we just popped right in and we talked about the dimensions of a Sukkah. A Sukkah should be, according to an opinion, less than 20 ames. Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay. It should not be shorter than 10 tefachim. It needs to have 3 walls, and there needs to be the proper balance of shade, more shade than sunlight. We took a few minutes looking at some of the manuscripts that were available. We bemoaned the challenge flipping through the Leiden Yerushalmi document, but I guess at the same time we should be grateful that it's available to us at all. Once upon a time, if you wanted to see a manuscript, you had to travel to the library that held it or find microfilm, and you could only look at it when you went there, and you had to know what you're looking for. And today we have the great blessing and privilege, in our case via Safaria, to access and see that, and so that's wonderful. Let me just find our beautiful pictures, because you can't do without pictures. Hold on. Let me schlep this over here. And so in case anyone didn't know what a tall sukkah looked like, this is what we looked at. If you want to know what a short sukkah looks like, here you go. You wanted to see a possible scenario of a sukkah without walls. Well, I'm sorry, without three walls. Well, there you see that. It's going to get a lot more complicated.
I still have the sky staying up in the air,
Yeah,
but
you got to wonder how it's staying up. Why is there no post? But on a computer-generated digital image, Alts, Alts is Meglach, everything is possible. And so that's what happened. And then we're going to see soon the Gemara introduces a mechloikes, a companion mechloikes, about a mavoy, alleyway, the way the Steinzel translates it, a mavoy that is being, that you have a post that's being installed to create an image, a tzura of a doorway so that people realize that it's not a public domain. And if its objective is to be visible, there's a machlokes, um, how high it must be. And there's a discussion about the difference of language. And so we're going to go there, but if you just want to envision the possible scenario, if you just, I want to show you here. So I'm not sure why they depict these structures as they do, but ostensibly here, if you can see where I'm tracing with my finger, is a wall that is shared by multiple units. So that would be a chutzner. Various chutzers open into a common space. That's a mavai. It's not a public thoroughfare, but it's an outlet that leads them into the public road. And so this mavai effectively flows one direction to the street, and you need to either put a kaira or a lachi to delineate and to show that it is a separate rishus and a rishus rabim. And we're going to talk about what you here. So if the mavai is too high, you got to bring it down. And that's also what we're discussing here. And soon, Mark, you saw a glimpse of the picture that we're going to discuss that you've been reminding us and referencing from. So let's go back here real fast. Sukkah shigavaya, no. Tanan Hasam, here's a Mishnah that we learned over there. Previously, if you learned Mesaches Eruvin, but for us, we'll just get a little tease. Mavai shigavaya ama yima 8. You need to lower it down. It's too tall. Rabbi Huda says, it is fine. And we already looked at Rashi, who explained that this post is meant to this beam, is meant to highlight or to indicate that it is in fact not part of the public domain. It draws a distinction. And the halacha is, if it's too tall, you should bring it down. Rabbi Huda disagrees. So the Gemara asks an interesting question, why do we use different language by the sukkah? We use two different words to discuss the problem. On a sukkah, we say the word pasul, disqualified, unfit, not kosher. Whereas by the mavai, the Mishnah just gives you a prescriptive fix. Tekanta. It says just lower it. The word is yimait, take it down. But it gives you a proposed solution. Why don't we also give a proposed solution by sukkah? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking that it actually makes a lot of sense. A beam is much easier to lower down than a sukkah. If you're going to take the schach down, you have to basically disassemble the whole sukkah. So it's not a takanta. But anyways, let's see the Gemara's initial well, anyways, we'll see the Gemara in a second. So the Gemara answer is the first answer. There's a big difference between this Eruv, this Mavai, and the Sukkah. Sukkah deraisa. The Sukkah is a biblical prescription. Rashi, Sukkah deraisa, the Esram Amadilo Yalfina Mideraisa. We infer, we learn the fact that it's supposed to be less than 20 amis, or up to 20 amis in the Torah. Even before there was a Mishnah, we knew this biblically. Hopefully we'll find out soon how, but let's just take his word for it at this time. But if it's a biblical obligation, pasul is the right language. Mavai dirabanan. Because the whole mavai issue is dirabanan. Let's look at Rashi, Tani Psula. Shayach lemisni balashan pasul. The language of pasul really fits more to a biblical command, because what it means is you have not done this properly. Today, I think we would probably expand this language. But in the time of the Gemara, this is a reasonable use of the language. Mavai, the kule midrabanan. The idea of a mavai needing any added fix.
Rabbi,
Yes, Professor.
uh, this attention to the nature of the law, rabbinical, Desoraita, does it denigrate the strictness of the rabbinic law? Doesn't it imply that it is less crucial to observe it?
I would.
Why in general we are interested in the origin of the law, being it from the Torah or by the rabbinic decisions?
Okay, this is a very interesting question, a very thoughtful and thought-provoking question. And in general, just to back up for a moment, the Jewish people work in two extremes, or there's two problems with rabbinic and biblical law. And then I'll get to your point. Some people don't at all acknowledge a distinction between biblical, rabbinic, and minhag. And it leads to certain significant mistakes about the hierarchy of different practices. Because, and I guess this is really the answer to your question, although a Jew is tasked with giving the same weight to a biblical mitzvah, a rabbinic enactment, and even to a minhag, assuming it's an appropriate minhag, there are many times where there are distinctions. For example, if there is a safek, there's generally more stringency with a biblical matter and leniency by a rabbinic matter. If there is a stacked rabbinic matter, a shavus to shavus, so there's additional leniency. A rabbinical matter could possibly be overridden by an additional biblical countering rabbinic matter, and so on. So there are, although you have to treat, not you, one must treat a rabbinic enactment with the same weight as biblical, there are many times where there are halachic distinctions between a biblical and rabbinic mitzvah. On the other hand, there are other people who are super aware of, and this is really what I gave you the answer, but I was saying it parenthetically to say the flip side of the coin, which there are some people that are super mindful of that which is biblical and rabbinic, and make the assumption that a rabbinic mitzvah is optional. And it's for that reason that there are many occasions where the Talmud actually will establish that there's a greater stringency by a rabbinic in certain areas. And I'm drawing a blank. I'm being able to give you the exact instance now, but it'll come to me and it'll probably come to you. There are times where the rabbinic matter is given a chizuk. The Chachamim say actually you have to be even more meticulous or demanding, lest one come to diminish the importance of a rabbinic matter. So the answer in a nutshell is, as far as commitment to observance, there is no difference. But there are a number of halachic distinctions. Now, Professor, here it's a little more interesting. Here, it sounds like there was a language evolution. And in the etymology of the word puzzle, according to this answer in the Gemara and according to Rashi, originally the word puzzle primarily was a biblical, an expression regarding biblical mandates, not rabbinic. And I think that's really what inspired your question. And in that case, your question kind of stands because this sentiment of this Gemara doesn't reflect our common sentiment regarding rabbinic versus biblical. Professor.
My question is originated from the statement in Dvarim, where Moshe says that there will be an authority at your time. And when you come to this authority, you should treat what they are saying in the same way as everything that I told you before.
Right.
Which implies, that there should be no distinction between two kinds of law.
Right. And Professor, just to add to what you're saying, every rabbinic matter has the weight of biblical because you're fulfilling. The Torah doesn't say thou shalt wash your hands for netilas yadayim, but the Torah says thou shalt follow the words, or don't deviate from the words of the Chachamim. And so therefore, yes, when you wash your hands in netilas yadayim, as a matter of fact, and again, Professor, I'm sorry if I'm over responding to your point. When we read the Megillah, say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Kiddushanu B'Tzoyis Al Mikra Megillah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with His commandments and commanded us about reading the Megillah. Megillah is ostensibly not in the 5 books of Moses. Now you might answer, but It's in the book of Esther, which is part of the Bible. Okay, but what about Hanukkah? We say, Asher Kedeshanu Mitzvos V'Tzivanu Lahadlik Ner Shel Hanukkah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who commanded us to light the menorah. Or when we say Netilas Yadayim, to wash our hands, we say Asher Kedeshanu Mitzvos V'Tzivanu Al Netilas Yadayim. Hashem commanded us to wash Netilas Yadayim. There is no biblical mandate, with the exception of maybe the priests, to wash your hands, and so on with many other rabbinic matters. So, Professor, again, I'm agreeing. I'm just strengthening your point. And the reason why we do make such a bracha is because the mitzvah is listen to the rabbis. Okay, it warrants additional unpacking, but that is the essence of the matter. So, Professor, I want to just let you know that your discomfort is not unique here. Tosfos, I believe, embraces your position. So before we go on, I don't want to confuse everyone, but this is interesting and important. The way Rashi seems to learn the Gemara is that the word pasul, disqualified, is very important to clarify that if you don't build your sukkah according to the right biblical prescriptions, it is not a kosher sukkah. It is pasul. Whereas when the Mishnah is describing a rabbinic matter, it's much more inclined to just give you a solution without making a strong statement, pasul. As if, and again, I want to just go back to Rashi. This is a big Rashi. Lashon pasul, koloimar loinasis katorah v'chahalacha. Pasul is a very strong statement. You've done this wrong. Whereas with the rabbinic matter, and again, this is Rashi's language, where it's only rabbinic, not to say that you don't keep rabbinic, but in order to differentiate, the Gemara seems to be saying, the Gemara just says, okay, you got it wrong, fix it. You got it wrong, fix it, but we're not going to attack you with his word pasul. That's what it seems, that's what Rashi seems to be saying. So here's what we need to do. We need to see the Gemara's next answer, and then we need to go back to Tosfos. Even if we're not going to look at the whole Tosfos, I just want to show how I think Tosfos expresses the professor's discomfort, the way he manages this case. So anyways, the first answer is, the difference is rabbinic or biblical, pasul, we give this heavy word, disqualified, unkosher, whereas in a rabbinic matter, we just give the fix. Another suggestion, it's not that we will never give a solution when there's something that's biblically wrong. Sukkah, the nefishi milas. Sukkah has a lot of halachas. It's complex. Rashi, the ein doimen tikoin noisei henzu lazu. Each problem has a very distinct, unique, and highly regimented fix. And each proposed fix, if it's too tall, you bring it down. And if it's too low, you lift it up. So this answer is that it's a little more linguistic, because our Mishnah mentions several problems, and obviously the solution to the problem is to undo it, but it's easier just to give us a single word, pasul. Pasul, which is a description for all the different things that are wrong, and then you can go back and fix each one. Whereas when it comes to the Maveh, the Mishnah is describing a single scenario. It's easier to just present or provide the solution. That's how Rashi explains this Gemara. I would have understood it a little differently. I would have understood it very simply. Maveh is easier to fix. The fix is a little less complicated. Whereas with a sukkah, you could technically try to fix a sukkah and make more problems. But again, that's not how Rashi explains this Gemara. That's not how this Gemara is understood. It's how I would possibly interpret the Gemara. Anyways, okay. So let's just go back for a moment. I want to see Tosfos. We'll look at this Tosfos, and Professor, you'll tell me if you disagree. It could be that I'm misreading this Tosfos. No, wrong Tosfos. I'm sorry, wrong Tosfos. Here we go. The Ayraisa Tani Psula. When it comes to a biblical matter, the language of the Mishnah is pasul. And this is what led to the professor's question about why are we seemingly taking a more lenient, lax approach to a rabbinic matter. So here Taisa says, the Ihavatani Yimayet, if the Mishnah would simply say, lower the schach, Chayshinon Dilba Toyi Inish. We're afraid people would make a critical mistake. Loimar Yimat Lichatchila. When the Mishnah says, here's what you should do to fix it, we would think he's giving you a ideal prescription, but not letting you know that if the schach is so high, it is actually unkosher. You would think, ideally, you should lower the schach. V'di avad keshera, but if it's already after the fact, it is kosher. And so Tosfos, I think, doesn't like the professor, that we would use puzzle to indicate a difference in severity of rabbinic or biblical. He just says it's very simple. You would not understand the halacha at all if we would not use this clear and unambiguous language. It's disqualified. And he was very careful in his language. Lest you get a deraisa totally wrong. And even though really puzzle is a jarring, sharp language, and there's a more elevated language, fix it. It's much more edel. It's much more refined, and the Torah tries to be refined. But we want to be clear. We want to be unambiguous. We want to make sure there are no mistakes. But in a rabbinic matter, we were less afraid that people would make this mistake, and so we used a more elevated language, a fixing language. And then Tosfos quotes a thing that we learned in the beginning of Psachim, that the Torah sometimes will add extra words. Here, folks, I'm sorry, I'm waiting for a call from Mordechai. One second, I'm sorry, just give me 10 seconds. It's Mordechai's birthday, and I encouraged him. They don't have school, and I encouraged him to daven at the other shul so he could daven with more kavanah and not have to rush out, because our Armenian started a little earlier. So I told him, call me, even if it's during my share, I'll pick up, and I'm going to pick him up after the class. All right. So what you see here is that the Torah is generally, and the Mishnah is generally very mindful of its language, and we'd rather be solution oriented than just disqualifying. When it comes to a biblical matter, there's a certain urgency to make sure that we communicate clearly and unambiguously what the halacha is, particularly because if you don't know the height, you will be totally out of the framework of a kosher sukkah. Inami, this is the answer that I was looking for. Ihavetani yimat. If the Mishnah would say, lower the schach, have a mashma kemois shehu, I would think that you just bring it down a few rungs. You ever tried to lower an oven rack? You just lower it down, right?
Yeah, take it out.
Basically, if you just shift down the schach, it's possible that you're not properly constructing a sukkah. And so you don't really just have the solution of lowering your schach. You'd have to remove the schach and then reinstall it at a lower height. And so the word yimat is simple and communicates everything you need to know in the case of mavoi, but in the case of sukkah, it's inadequate. And so therefore, instead of giving you an answer that is prone to being misunderstood, we would rather just tell you it's puzzle, and then you'll have to already figure out, okay, I know the laws of sukkah. What are the laws of sukkah? And you'll apply your deduction and figure out how to do it while being fully mindful. So I believe Professor Tosfos here, thinking about your question, not liking the idea that we would just distinguish or differentiate language between rabbinic and biblical commands, finds additional reasons why the communication of the Mishnah about Mavai would not work in the case of Sukkah. All right, there you have it. So, Professor, what they say in yeshiva is when you ask a question, that the Tosfos asked, and there's probably a different way to say this in academic world, is Baruch Shekivanti. Thank God that I was able to be in alignment with brilliant minds of the past. If it's possible to ask a question no one's ever asked, but if you ask a question that someone's asked in the past, that means that you're really On target. All right. Now the Gemara dropped a radical assertion. The Gemara dropped a comment that Sukkah the Araisa, the height of Sukkah is the Araisa. Certainly the way Rashi explained it. Rashi, the Esrim Amadi lo Yalfina midaraisa. Okay, so I'm sorry, no, I'm reading the wrong place. Minohani Mili. How do we know? Where would you know that a sukkah cannot be over 20 feet? Mark, I hope you're
Yes,
staying, I hope you're locked and loaded. Amar Rabbah. Amar Kra, there's a verse that says, Leman Yedu Doire Seichem. Ki Basukais Hoishaftias B'nai Yisrael. The Torah says, we build sukkahs so the generations will be mindful. They will know about the story of the Exodus and the huts we sat in. Okay, so what? Ad Esrim Amma, until the height of 20 Amas, Adam Yedeya Shehudar B'Sukkah, a person will be immediately aware, immediately mindful, and reminded that he is in a sukkah. L'maylo Esrim Amma, when the walls are higher than 20 Amas, Ein Adam Yedeya Shehudar B'Sukkah Mishum Delei Sholta by Eina, it doesn't catch your range of vision. So here's what he's saying. This, of course, if you're a Torah observant Jew, and your desire is to fulfill the mitzvah, and you intentionally walked to a sukkah, of course you know you're in a sukkah. But will the sukkah's dimensions remind you of the fact you're in a sukkah? Will your very presence trigger an awareness that you're in an atypical, special space? And so when this height is beyond the range of vision, you may know, but it's not the sukkah contributing to your awareness. Let's see Rashi, and then I'm sure we have a number of questions that we need to discuss. Rashi. L'man yedu oisa sukkah, make a sukkah, sheyeshivasa nikeres lecha, that it is clear to you that you're sitting in a sukkah. D'chsev yedu ki basukkah seshafti, sivisi leishev hachi dorish leva. Afagav de'ein yoytze midei pshuta dehekef ananei kabed miud arshen le'drasha. Obviously, there's a broader commemorative element of this mitzvah, but it also should mean that you should actually remember by the sukkah itself. What does it mean that your eyes don't see the schach, the sukkah? Rashi, she'enoi roya es haschach. You can't see the schach. So a sukkah has multiple components. It's the coverage, it's the walls, it's the floor, it's the door, it's the decorations. So what does it mean that you cannot see the sukkah? Of course you see the sukkah. And if you're in Florida and you have lattice schach or some kind of material schach, and it has the blessings of the sukkah on it, of course you know you're in a sukkah. But when it says see the sukkah, we mean see the schach. And your default sitting, when you sit, you see according to the Talmud up to 20 feet. Now, I think we should acknowledge that if you're in a larger sukkah, you'll see the height of the sukkah further, right? But if you're sitting in a small-ish sukkah, and now maybe the depiction that they gave us makes a little more sense.
Rabbi.
Hold on. I mean, go ahead. I want to show you. You see the sukkah? And Mark, I intentionally didn't show the next picture. It's a small sukkah that's very tall. If you're sitting at that table, there is no chance your eyes are going to naturally see the schach unless you look up. But if you're just sitting there, your eyes can only see a certain way. The larger the sukkah is, the further the height of your vision is. But anyways, okay. That's that. Rebero?
Why is there no discussion about the other dimension, the length?
Hold on. We're very, very early on in the Masechta, so I would not assume anything is not mentioned.
Okay.
But the Mishnah is generally, I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying we should hold our judgment about what's not mentioned. I will say that in general, there is a system of how the Mishnah unveils or introduces different subjects to us. And so we've so far had a package that describes the areas that are strongly connected to the halachic framework dimensions, which is the number of walls, the height, and size. We will, I think, discuss, but it's not, the halachas don't really dictate the size. You can have a very, very big sukkah, but how big, we'll see.
Isn't the minimal height much more meaningful today?
What do you mean?
If it's too low,
Yes.
I mean, and many sukkahs today that are sold are really not very good for people who are, let's say, over 6 feet or well over 6 feet, starting with getting in the door, which is lower, and then even when you say,
So
I'm
here's
not sure.
I was thinking this too. You'll tell me if I'm answering the question correctly. I think that as far as height is concerned, if you can't get into a sukkah, it's a little less it's more technical and less halachic. Height, being too high, it's very easy to go in the sukkah.
Right,
Convey
too low. Yeah, but I'm talking about
too
too low.
too low, it's a harder scenario to begin with. And 10 tvachim is way too low, really. You have to be in
Well,
a
yeah, for
crouching.
sure.
Um,
If it was said in an exception, as though acknowledging that there are people who are very small, whatever label you want to give to that
right,
community, that you don't want them to feel that it's 10 feet high when they are 3 feet tall, these people, and you want them to feel like you want children when you make toys for children,
right.
so that would be one thing, but that's not it. But I'm saying I really, there are often I see people being uncomfortable in the sukkah because their head to get in, and secondly, I'm not talking about 7 footers. I'm talking about people 6'3", six
Right,
four,
right, right,
and then they're touching the schach or the things that are hanging, the
right.
decorations, and I'm
No, yeah,
just
I hear you. Although
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, okay,
I
yes,
mean, yeah, I mean, when you have a lot of latitude, we should certainly try to make sukkahs that are welcoming to all heights. Um, I mean, today, especially if you look at the basketball teams, you have Kanai Nahara, some very, very tall young men.
yeah,
So if
yeah.
you want to host the YU basketball team for in the sukkah, you better build a seven
Well, why
foot.
you said so too is not a good example of height. So let's
Okay, the
yeah,
Jewish team is generally not going to be
you want the Israeli team is
okay, okay. But I assure you, they're taller than me. So
yeah, no. I'm just saying, it's okay.
yeah, um, yeah. All right. So the first answer, how do you know the height? Well, you have to make your sukkah reflect the height that a person can naturally see in a not too big space. 20 amas is too high. Rabbi Zera has a different answer. The Torah says, "V'sukkah tihiyah litzel yoimam mei choy rev." This is in the book of Isaiah, where there's a reference to the sukkah, that the sukkah would be for shade in the day. What is mechayrev? Here he translates from heat. Okay. Ad esrim ama adam yoshev b'tzel sukkah. When you're sitting in a small-ish sukkah, up to 20 amas, the shade is being generated by your sukkah. When it's above 20 amas, ein adam yoshev b'tzel sukkah. The exception of perfect noon. I don't mean noon in the clock. I mean the perfect when the sun is exactly on top of you. But in the balance of the day, you're sitting in the shade of the walls. Mark, this is familiar to all of us thanks to you. And now let's take a look at a beautiful depiction. The schach shade only reaches till here, according to this picture.
Yeah,
And if
that
you're
makes
in the
sense.
shade, it's because the walls.
Well,
Excuse me.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's I guess I said it too soon
No, you're fine.
earlier.
All right, folks, my energy saver is on. So here's what I'm gonna do because I have to pick up my son. We're gonna learn a little more, and when the computer dies, that's gonna be the end. So we'll squeeze in what we can. I thank you for your patience. We have officially 9 minutes left. Let's see how much we can get out of our battery. Ad Esther Mama, Adam Yoshe B'Tzel Sukkah, L'mayla Master Mama, in Adam Yoshe B'Tzel Sukkah, L'Tzel Defanais, you're only in the shade of your walls. Rashi, Sukkah Tia L'Tzel, Mashma In Sechach, Ela Ha'aseh L'Tzel. The Schach is to create shade, but not the Tzil Defanais. Shahatzalolim. It's an interesting word. If Rabbi Nachem's not on, I'm curious if in modern Hebrew we talk about shades, multiple. Shahatzalolim. Magim Zela Zeh. Mitoch Goivan Shal Defanais. The walls are so high that it casts shades all around the ein sarich schach If you wanted to be in the shade, you wouldn't need schach. Well, the common muki pluktai Rab Zera b'shein ba'ela arba al arba the kimlu l'rabbanan the b'hai shira leikat sel schach el sel shodafanes. So later on, the Gemara is going to elaborate about other dimensions that have implications on these two opinions, if it's very short or very tall, and so forth. So let's keep our eyes peeled for further analysis. Amalei Abaye says, hang on, Rabbi Zera, Elameata, 1 second, Oisa Sukkasai, Ba'ashtadois, Karnayim. If you build your sukkah in we know Ashtadois Karnayim from the biblical reference, but Rashi, Shnei Harim Gedolim, V'hashveila Beineyam, and there's a valley in between them. You can place a sukkah in a mountain, in a valley between two mountains, and you never have any shade. Or we'll give another answer. You could put your sukkah in a condo canyon. And if you're on Ocean Drive, let's say you would build a sukkah in front of the Lamer. No, Lamer is a bad example. I have to think of a street that has two tall buildings on two sides of the street. Anyways, you get the point. You could be in a scenario where you're always being shaded, no matter where the sun is from two tall buildings. So, Hachanami do I have a sukkah? Are you going to tell me that you can't build a sukkah in the shade? You can't build it in a condo canyon or a mountainous cavern? Amarle, the Gemara says, no, Hasam, Dal, Ashtois, Karnayim, it could sell sukkah. No, it's very simple. All you need to do is get rid of Ashtois, Karnayim, and then you have schach. Hacha, Dal, Defanais, Leka, Sel, Sukkah. If you were to remove the walls, there would be no shade at all. And you need to be in a scenario where there could be, or there would have been, shade from your sukkah. Rashi, it's Dal, Defanes, Leka, Sel Sukkah, Shechama Ba'al, Mitachtehem, Nimsa, Shma, Batal. It needs to be a structure that, absent external shading factors, the shade of the schach is what's providing you your shade. Rabba says, hold on. So we have already one answer which says, L'man yedu. There's das involved. You have to be able to perceive the schach. It can't be too high. You don't perceive it. Rabbi Zera says, no, it's very simple. The shade needs to be coming to you from the schach, not from the walls. Let's see a third answer. So we had already Rabbi Zera, Abaya. Now we're going to see Rava entering the biblical pylon over here. Rav Amar, Mehacha, Basukais Teshvu Shivas Yomim. You should be sitting in sukkahs 7 days. Rashi, Sukkah shall Shiva Vesulay. It should only be a 7-day sukkah. Rashi, Dahainu Arai, it's temporary. Vidaya b'mechitzas kalis, and it could be made with a flimsy structure. Amra Torah, the Torah tells us, Kol Shivas Hayamim Tzei Mediras Keva. You should not be sitting in strong, permanent structures. V'shei b'diras aray, and sit in a frail, flimsy structure. Ad esrim ama adam oisa dirasay diras aray. A structure up to 20 amas can be a temporary structure. L'maylam esrim ama, but if you're going to build something that's as tall as 20 plus amas, ein adam oisa dirasay diras aray el diras keva. This needs a lot of strong support. Rashi, sarich lasois yisoidei seha umechitzei seha. You must structure it, you must build it in a very solid way. I don't think Rava is saying that you need to have a flimsy structure. What he's saying is the dimensions need to be possible in a relatively flimsy structure. Excuse me. Hold on. Are you saying that if you built a solid sukkah with steel or metal, or it's not kosher? What do you mean? This is what I meant to say. It's up till 20 amas. It's plausibly a temporary hut or structure. Diras keva. Nami nafik. It could also be temporary. Therefore, the dimensions would allow for a temporary structure. Therefore, even if it's permanent, it's kosher. L'mayla mi'esrim amma, but a structure that's 20 amas plus. The Adam Isa the Yosei Diras. The Adam Isa the Yosei Diras Kava. Ideally, or primarily, or typically, this is a permanent structure. Avid lay Diras Arai. When you make it a temporary nami loy not like you're not Yaitza even in such a scenario. So we look at it as it would relate to a common situation. Rashi ad esr mama shapir dami devad yesh bechal keva arai very also ketira al korchach like pida Torah arai. The Torah wasn't meticulous that it should be a flimsy structure, just that these are the dimensions that are typically able to be flimsy. Okay, the Gemara is going to say we have three opinions. Why don't each embrace the other? I'm going to read this last line and then I'm going to have to go. Kulu kirabba loy amri. Why doesn't everyone else agree with Rabbah? What did Rabbah say? L'man yedu, that the sukkah is there for awareness. You have to see it. Hahu yediyah l'dayrasi. It's not talking about the sukkah triggering yediyah. It's that the whole practice, the whole art is for this. So we've turned the page to 2b, but we're going to stop right here. My dear friends, have a wonderful Shushan Purim. Let's have good news. One should feel good and be well. And the Yashir Kayach.
Amen. Shakor.
Thank you. Shkach.